In this video, no business logic in SQL, we're going to look at a pattern that's common but not ideal. Then we're going to look at some other options that'll give us a more sustainable and maintainable ROC instance. Here's a query looking for groups based on their group type ID, which has been hard-coded into the SQL. This could be for a report, it could be for a metric. There's a lot of reasons we could do this. Let's say in this case, it's a metric doing attendance for check-in areas. And these 5 check-in areas have been chosen to be grouped together to be pulled into this metric. Now, why is this a problem? Well, let's say a year from now, a new group type gets added, one that should be counted in with the metric as well. Odds are, a year later, people aren't going to remember this. It might even be the person who wrote it who still is aware of that change, but they don't remember. They need to go back to this metric and add that group type in. Probably, at some point later, someone's going to say, hey, the metric numbers aren't right anymore. And then it'll be time to dig through and try to figure out why the metric's running. Everything seems okay. There's no errors or exceptions. But then we see, oh, we need to add in the new group type that's missing. If we can take that logic and we can move it outside of the SQL and out into ROC where it can be managed by admins, we can make the SQL more resilient, the metric will be more maintainable, and our system in general will work better for us in the long term. This is true across all kinds of situations, and how can we do better with this? One way we might look at it is if we're using group types, we have the group type purpose. Group type purpose is a property on group types, and you can set it with a value, and then we could filter on that. When we do our join, we just see what that value ID is, and then it lets us get any groups we've set that on. Of course, one issue with that is there's only one group type purpose on a group. You can't have more than one. Maybe it's already been used by the group types you want to work with for something else, or maybe you want to save it for something else down the road, and not just for this one metric or this one report. That's okay. If that's the case, we have other options. We could do an attribute on group type. In this case, we made one called isClass. And so we're saying anytime a group type gets checked that it's true, that it is a class, then we're going to add it into our query. This can be used for more than just looking at group types, say for metrics, like I said, in different areas of check-in. Maybe you could use it when you're thinking about how to get a query based on your group structure. Sometimes someone will say, hey, we want to know something about all the groups that are underneath this group in our tree. Now, your mind might go to doing something like, hey, let's look at the parent group ID, or let's write a recursive CTE that lets us just climb down that tree and get all those groups. Of course, the problem is those structures change, and maybe somebody will want to start counting a group that's not under that parent group anymore, or it's a child of one. And so using an attribute allows us to say, hey, put these groups anywhere you want, and as long as you set the attribute to true, we'll pick it up. But what might be a concern with this? I know the one that comes to my mind is I've seen those joins continually get added to these queries, and that would be performance. In fact, we took a look at this, and we set statistics time on as we ran our queries, and we saw that with the hard-coded values, it was an average of about a millisecond per time we ran the query, which is fantastic. When we put on group type purpose, our average jumped to about 68 milliseconds, and with the group type attribute, 74. Now, I think it's important to remember 68 milliseconds and 74 milliseconds is still pretty fast. In fact, if we're looking at what we're buying, and that's truly the cost, it's well worth it just to take that hit. You've still given yourself a much better situation in the long term, and especially if it's something like a metric, or if this was the only query on a report, this isn't so long that it's going to really cause a big problem. But still, we want to be as fast and performant as we can. Our users usually want things quickly, and we want to deliver it that way. And if we always keep that mindset, we'll do better. So here's another option to consider. We've kept the attribute, but instead of just doing a straight query where we just, as traditional, join and get that value, first we set up a table variable. We have a table variable called class group type IDs. It has one column in it. It's an int column with the ID. And then we fill it with a select. And inside of it, we put our 5 group types that we want. Then we select from that as a subquery on our where clause, and we get the groups we need. When we do this, we drop our average time for the query to run down to 19 milliseconds. We've helped out the query optimizer in SQL Server, and now we have all the benefits of using this attribute. Instead of hard-coding the group IDs, we've taken the ministry logic out of the query and moved it back out into Rock where it belongs, and we have something that's more maintainable and sustainable for our ministry. This is a great pattern. Anytime we find ourselves thinking, I need to store a group ID or a set of group IDs or group type IDs, we really want to think, is there an opportunity here to keep that logic out of the SQL and keep it in the interface?